Hey, welcome back to another episode of Wednesday Wisdom on the Educational AD Podcast. We'll be right back with today's guest, but first, let's hear from our podcast sponsors that make this all possible. We want to thank Final Forms, the industry leader in forms and registration. But Final Forms is more than just forms. Final Forms is a team, it's technology, and it provides schools with compliance, communication, and risk management solutions. Final Forms can help your stakeholders with mobile accessibility, has reminders for parents about policies and physicals, and all the forms that go with athletics. Final Forms can also help with team communication and attendance and even certification management for coaches. And for ADs, Final Forms can help with eligibility, with rosters, all the reports that come across your desk. And it does this with secure language translation and ADA compliance. It's time for you to talk with a team that's walked in your shoes. To take the next steps and find out what Final Forms can do for you, go to finalforms.com/Jake. That's finalforms.com/Jake and get started working with Final Forms. We also want to thank Sideline Interactive. Sideline Interactive's indoor scoring tables and video boards can generate $10,000 or more every year and also create the ultimate game day experience for your athletes. Go to sidelineinteractive.com or call 832-786-0302 to schedule a live web demo and see their tables and boards in action. You can also email them at sales@sidelineinteractive.com and find out exactly what their fantastic products can do for you. That's sales@sidelineinteractive.com. We also want to thank Wall of Fame by Vital Signs. They're on a mission to bring your school's legacy to life. They've got a variety of interactive touchscreens, consoles, and an extensive library of templates to help recognize the athletic achievements of your students, both past and present. Let Vital Signs help you showcase your school's diverse history and your proudest moments by going to vitalsignswalloffame.com or call them at 614-981-3589. And you can also email them at sales@vitalsignswalloffame.com. That's sales@vitalsignswalloffame.com. We also want to thank Huddle. Remember, at Huddle, we power sports. Over 200,000 teams use Huddle to elevate the performance of their teams using video and analytics. Huddle's the complete performance platform. They have online tools, smart cameras like the Huddle Focus. There's always been analytics, but there's a whole lot more. Huddle's also built for every level of play, from club and youth teams all the way through high schools and colleges, and even the pros use Huddle to help their teams play at the highest level. You're in pretty good company with over 6 million users, including your student athletes and the coaches of the teams you're trying to get to recruit your kids. You want to find out more about what Huddle can do for you and your program and how your school can become a Huddle school, go to huddle.com and talk to their professionals. Remember, at Huddle, we power sports. We also want to thank Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack are a quick and easy way to collect comprehensive data that allows you to evaluate and improve your entire athletic program. Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack also connects you with the 95% of the parents and the student athletes that really love your program. And it gives them a voice to help demonstrate the importance that a positive athletic experience has for them. Go to athleticsurveys.com and check out their testimonials, and then give them a call at 1-800-738-6466, or you can email them at info@athleticsurveys.com to get started. If you've never used a survey to take the pulse of your student athletes or your parents, you're really missing out. Talk to the folks at Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack and let them show you how to take your athletic program from good to great. And we want to thank our good friends at Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. You can find out more about what Hometown Ticketing can do for you and your school by going to hometownticketing.com and talk to their experts. Hometown Ticketing, simple and easy online ticketing. Hey, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Wednesday Wisdom on the Educational AD Podcast. This week, we're visiting again with a good friend, Jennifer Siess. She is the founder of Mind to Define. She is a mental performance coach. She works with teams, she works with athletes, works with organizations, and really has some cool stuff to share. But Jennifer, welcome back to Wednesday Wisdom.
Thanks for having me. It's been a bit, so I've enjoyed listening to the ones since, and I'm happy to be here today.
Well, we're excited to hear what you have for us. Again, you and I talked a little bit before we came on about, the importance of, the mental game. And I don't think there's a coach or an AD that would deny that, yeah, it really does have an impact on performance as well as mental health. But
Right.
what do you have for us this way in the area of mindset performance?
Yeah, thank you for having me. As you know, I was noodling over several ideas. I always listen to the other Wednesday wisdoms and I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. Oh, that's a great idea. And so I kind of had some of my own. And then actually I was at my kids' choir performance last night and on a break, happened to check something out. And there was this article written that had a really eye-catching headline about, what sports are doing to our kids. So of course I had to open it and ended up being like, not what I thought really good. And I thought, I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity. I know you had some guests in the past, recent, do it too. Mental Health Awareness Month. We probably need to be aware all months, but I'll take a month where we can talk about it freely. And hopefully we can talk about it all the time. And so I thought, I can table what I had from before. I'd really like to talk about the role of, what my role would be in that kind of journey for an athlete. It's the place where, frankly, I struggled the most as an athlete. Competitively, I didn't normally struggle too much with the physical. If anybody's ever heard the get out of your head, don't think so much, those kinds of things. And well, I was that kind of player. So, and would roll my eyes and be like, wouldn't that be awesome? How do I do that? So I wanted to really kind of talk about the view. What we have in the news, of course, is it's tragic news. It's right. It's tragic, horrible. I think about my 15-year-old boy who wants to graduate early and go to college and maybe play. And I'm thinking, oh, I didn't think about this being a possible scenario and something he'd have to struggle with and could end up so tragic. So what I like to think, and I wonder about these players, these athletes who, went through what they went through. And I don't understand all of that psychologically. I'm not a clinical psychologist, but the way I look at it is, can we possibly at some point in time head some of these things off by introducing more the idea of mental fitness? So I'm about to, as I told you on the call, I'm going to do a training tonight. I'm going to finish a training for a team and I'm excited about it. And they're going to hear the same words they've heard from me every session is mental is a skill. And that's where I lead. So it's not unusual for a player to come on with me or a team and to be like, is something wrong with me? Is this just visualization? What is this? And it's like, I want to say unequivocally, it's a skill. And we can get really nitty gritty about it and say that mindset skill is a physical skill because all that connection and all that stuff happens is biochemical. It's all physical, but we don't see it until we see it. We don't see what's happening until we actually see it. And we usually see it because we see problems, right? We see my player hits like a beast in the cages and cannot hit, at bat. We can do this and this and this in practice, or they're playing for indoor, but against a really good team, but then they go out to their select team and they don't do any of those moves. So we know that that's all mental. None of that, maybe a little bit's physical, but most of it is mental. And what I thought that we could focus on today is, again, like talking about mental, where I'm coming from, isn't where we're getting clinical. It's where we're fit. Are we mentally fit? And I thought it was really interesting that, back when I played, Jake, and maybe back when you played, I just went to practice.
Yep.
It was when softball, maybe we went to the cages and they were usually recreational cages. And as I got a little older, you start to see some of the sports change, right? Like training that wasn't offered before was being offered, speed and agility, a friend of mine started a speed training. And I was like, why would you train speed? Isn't that just like you just have it or you don't? And she's like, no, you know, all these things can be trained. We athletes go to the gym for strength. We stretch for flexibility. Back when I first started, we didn't stretch at all. We just went out and played. And then we, bore the consequences of that. Endurance, coordination, agility. They go to the training rooms, right? There weren't, in high school was kind of the first, I think it was my junior or senior, it was the first time we actually had a training room that you got your ankles taped. Maybe you got a little massage when something's tight. That was new. Hadn't had anything like that. So sports are evolving, and we do talk a lot about how much money and time as parents and coaches we spend on all the extras besides practicing 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times a week. All these extras that we do, and I think we're missing one. I think we're missing the mental as a skill. And I really like my players, my athletes, to think about it, in terms of you pull your quad, you tell your coach, I pulled my quad, coach says, go to the trainer, right? You're in a game and maybe you get a concussion or a suspected a concussion. We're not afraid to talk about it. In fact, now we have concussion testing courses. I had to do that to get my license to coach in soccer. I had to take a course in concussions and try and show that I could maybe identify those. That wasn't a thing back in my day. So things are changing all the time, and I think for the better. And I think that the one place, if I could really beef it up a little bit, is to say, from when they're young, add the mental part of the game, whether it's, how we think, how we talk, what we do after failure, which is expected. We're looking to seek for that perfect skill in a way, but we learn best from failure. And it's surprising, although not surprising, how many times athletes cannot process that. And they have a hard time processing that this is a definite part of the entire experience that we have that. And so what I'm trying to do is normalize it in a way with all the players that I work with, that this is no different than going to a speed coach. It's no different than going to a hitting coach. It's no different than going to the doctor I took my son to the chiropractor. His hamstrings he's growing he's 15 and won't stop growing, and his hammies are really tight. Now, I thought nothing about taking him to my chiropractor and saying, hey, can you help my guy out here? Yet we have this block when it comes to the mental. We have this block that, what player goes up to a coach, because I didn't, and say, hey, coach, I'm having a hard time. When I strike out, I just can't get back into the game. I'm struggling with that. And it's not something a player ever asked me or I thought to coach. And so I just thought that was maybe an interesting part. When I read these news stories, I was like, no, God, no. And I'm thinking, what, if anything, early as possible, can we do as we coach and as we parent, and athletic directors, or also kind of like club administrators, as we set up our programs to support our athletes, that we add this as an everyday skill like we would anything else. And I wonder what you thought about that, to put you on the spot.
Well, again, you and I have talked about this, and you're right. Some of our other guests have talked about different aspects of this. From a performance standpoint, let's be very cynical and just look at, wins and losses and batting average and all that stuff. Coaches are going to train technique. They're going to train physical conditioning, all of those traditional things that you and I went through as athletes, in my case, 100 years ago. They will, I think ADs and coaches are also going to acknowledge things like motivation and self-confidence, again, from a cynical performance standpoint,
Sure.
have a tremendous factor in success or let's say non-success athletically. And you mentioned initially this whole idea of mental fitness, of emotional fitness. I think that's where we like to operate. And again, as you mentioned, unfortunately, sometimes our kids are not at that point of mental fitness. They're, let's say, at mental health, whatever that baseline is. And
Right.
again, others are not quite there. They're struggling with as you mentioned, anxiety or depression or other, very serious, social, emotional conditions. And
Right.
how does the AD, how does the coach um, meet the needs of those kids? Well, if a coach was a pitcher in college or high school, and that's their forte, they can coach the heck out of pitching, but they might not be the best hitting coach. So they're going to go hire
Right.
an assistant that can do that. The same thing in track and field or soccer or anything else. You're going to find assistants that are good at that.
Right.
Well, now I think it's very clear. And again, you alluded to this when you first started sharing, is that we're not all experts in this area and shouldn't feel like we have to be, but we
Right.
do need to address the needs of our student athletes. And that means, finding an assistant, working with somebody in your community, and finding someone like you, a mental performance coach that can come in and touch on those areas and help out at one level, and maybe even refer them to another professional for more help. So, absolutely, it's something that should be addressed and needs to be addressed in today's student athlete.
Yeah, and I agree. And I know we're getting close to break time, but in the words of my daughter's former softball coach, and she just picked other sports and crushed his soul when she moved on from softball. He's a great coach, and he actually brought me on to my first team trainings. I wasn't even considering doing those until he was like, I want to do this for my team. And there are two other teams in the club that want to do it. It was awesome. He loves to use the hashtag work on everything. And I think, like, isn't that what we should be doing? I mean, just because we did it one way long ago, I went to 2 practices a week for about 2 hours at a time. I think that was like a busy week, right? And then later we introduce all these aspects and we say, that's really great. And that's really cool. And go to the trainer and take care of your body and take care of your fitness. And I think that mental fitness is also something that we should spend time and take care on. You don't have to have bad mental health to not be in shape mentally. Like, you don't have to necessarily have an anxiety disorder to need some assistance and some improvement with processing a mistake that maybe keeps happening in a game. And I think the more and more we do that, whether it's, somebody like me, what you'd call more of a special teams coach, right? Or you're able to introduce those things to coaches that they can also then weave into their practices, just like you weave in any other skill, the better off these players will be as the pressure increases because they get older.
No, absolutely. And that theme, hey, let's get better, certainly runs throughout all sports. For listeners, we're visiting today with Jennifer Siess. She's the founder of Mind to Define. She's a mental performance coach and coaches in a number of areas. But we're going to take a quick break, hear from a couple of our sponsors, and then we're going to be back with some more mental performance coach tips from our guest, Jennifer Siess. Please stay with us. We want to thank Final Forms for their support of the Educational AD podcast and Wednesday Wisdom. Final Forms is the leader in registration and athletic forms, but they're more than just forms. Final Forms is a team, it's technology, and it provides schools with compliance, communication, and risk management solutions. Final Forms also helps your stakeholders with mobile accessibility, and it has reminders for parents about policies, about physicals, and all the forms that go with being an athlete. Final Forms can also help with team communication and attendance and even certification management for coaches. And for athletic directors, Final Forms can help with eligibility, with rosters, and all the reports that come across your desk. And it does this with secure language translation and ADA compliance. It's time for you to talk to a team that's walked in your shoes. To take the next steps and find out what Final Forms can do for you, go to finalforms.com/Jake. Once again, go to finalforms.com/Jake to get started on the Final Forms team. We also want to thank Sideline Interactive for their support. Sideline Interactive's indoor scoring tables and video boards can generate $10,000 or more every year, while they also create the ultimate game day experience for your student athletes. Go to sidelineinteractive.com or call them at 832-786-0302 to schedule a live web demo and see their tables and boards in action. You can also email them at sales@sidelineinteractive.com and find out exactly what their fantastic products can do for you. That's sales@sidelineinteractive.com. Welcome back, everyone. We're visiting today with Jennifer Siess, a very good friend of mine and the founder of Mind to Define Mental Performance Coaching. Jennifer, again, we've talked about how athletic directors and coaches readily acknowledge the importance of mental performance training, and then they'll follow up and say, "Well, if I only had time to do it." Okay,
That's
well,
right.
you and I know that they need to start carving out time. And when they do that, what are some things that maybe they can do as coaches or ADs, or even what are some things that you can do for them as we encourage them to reach out and get in touch with you? So,
Yeah, that's
what?
fantastic. And you're exactly right. Like, I don't ever run into a coach or anybody in the sports world that doesn't think this is important, right? We know that. But I challenge that view because I know that, you know, there are times we have to, as a team, sit down and watch game tape. Right. And I didn't see that until I was in college. Like, we didn't look at strategically how we played. And now when I go to fields, I see a GoPro everywhere, right? Like, they're constantly reviewing that stuff. And we're not only reviewing it to improve, but we're doing what Sue Enquist from UCLA says, we're giving the game back to them, right? We're teaching them how to manage themselves by watching themselves. So we do take time away from the skilling and the drilling, what I call the skilling and the drilling is all I ever grew up doing. And it is important, but at the same time, so are those, the work on everything aspects. We take time to have them go to the gym. We take time to have them go to the weight room. We take time and say, today we got to work on endurance, team. We're going to work on that part. So we do step away from the skilling and drilling sometimes, or carve out time for other things that we know support the game. And I think if we can also acknowledge and, convince ourselves that time away from skilling and drilling spent on the mental part of it, processing, performing under pressure, handling mistakes, because like sports, even at the college level, and I know we think sometimes at the college level, by then you're done developing. And I don't think you are. And I work with some college athletes, mostly high school and middle school. And like, the sports is controlled failure. I mean, what a great way to teach our kids, who are going to be our adults and our leaders one day, about failing in a controlled environment to an extent. I mean, because really, the worst thing that happens is you feel bad and you feel like you let your team down. I mean, and that stinks. I've been there. You've probably been there. But like, that's the worst thing that honestly happens from a mistake or failure. So to have it controlled and to teach them what most of those players lead with when I first start working with them. And I've even had one ask boldly in a training in front of her whole team is, how do I not feel bad? Like, it's emotion. So they're talking about emotion. And even though I'm going to rain on Valentine's Day parade, emotion's not held in our heart. It's held in our heads and in our central nervous system. It all starts there. So, my quick answer to them is, you don't not feel bad. That's not our goal. The goal of mindset training and performance is not to get you from sad to happy as quickly as we can. It's from getting you to what just happened, and then very quickly, right? So going from, I have it actually written down so I don't miss it. So imagine I just drew it up, a goalie. I'm soccer, so I've got soccer tonight. So I'm thinking about the goalie. And actually I had a goalie in training in high school. Bring it up. She felt like she let the entire team down with this one save she should have had. And it was like, my heart leapt a little bit, because in that moment, members of her team turned to her in the training and said, we didn't feel like that at all. Like, I mean, we were upset that we got scored on, but we didn't blame you, and it was an aha. And I just, I had the privilege of witnessing some team bonding with them and the coach, and it's all emotion regulation, and, that bonding and teamwork and being able to talk about it as openly as you would talk about, hey, our shooting percentage is off. We talk about that with no problem. So why aren't we talking about this? And then, like you said, for athletic directors to be able to help their programs add this into that. But if you think about, when the athletes I work with that, and probably you've seen them over and over in your career, that we don't have any problem with the successes. Those are great. We'll take those all day long. It's when it's the letdowns. And it's one thing, to have, a goalie makes, let's say bad, doesn't make a save. And so what we look for is to help her or him quickly regulate that emotion. The emotion comes faster than the thought. Feeling bad happens before you even can voice, this is what just happened. And then to quickly, and I'm talking about sometimes in a matter of seconds, get them to refocus. Did they have to learn a lesson? Adjust, and then pivot for a new success. So it's really, there's a lady on LinkedIn who calls it emotional agility. And so I would say emotional agility is probably really tied to mental fitness, and how we choose to process those things. So athletic directors, I would like to encourage to reach out to people who do this. There's coaches all over. There's sports psychologists. We know they've been working with the pros for eons. It seems like that's been around forever. But I'll give you an example. My 15-year-old, gosh, he'll be 16 in 2 weeks. And he's a sophomore, and we got an email from the athletic director who is really great. I love all the coaches there, and said they're going to add some more things to support their athletes. And I thought, this is awesome. And they're going to add more open kind of times to the weight room so that players can go in season or out of season, and they will make sure they have staff there. So I'm guessing these are coaches who know what to do and what not to do with weight training, because we know that athletes who are strong with their muscles are going to do better in the game. They're protected more against injuries, right? We're supporting the whole athlete. I would like to see mental training as just a part of that additional offering that we give them, right? They don't just go to practice, we go to all these things. And if schools can start offering it as well, whether it's singularly, right, offering it for services like somebody like me for one-on-one trainings. I really love doing team trainings because now you get the whole team and the coach on board. And if we can kind of top down that, right, and we make our environment that entire way. And I would imagine that coaches are held accountable sometimes to an athletic director for results as well. I mean, coaches know what it feels like to have to deliver. They know what their players feel like that when they have to deliver. We all feel like that. And if we could add the mental aspect to that, and teach that as a part of our culture, right? Our culturally, what did we learn from this season versus wins and losses? Those are important. And I get that. We're never going to get rid of outcomes. But what else did you get besides wins and losses? Because if we didn't get more than that, then I wonder why we're doing it at all. Right. So in the end of the day, you and me, we're proof positive just of our games will end in this way at some point. And if we didn't part with anything else, I'll talk about all the time, what do we learn from team sports? Teamwork. What do you learn from sports? Sportsmanship, discipline, grit, resilience. I love those things. Those to me are better than being 48 years old and still being able to strike a ball correctly. Don't get me wrong. I love doing that. I love knowing I can do that, but I don't use that skill every day. I use these skills every day. And if you were to tell me, or an AD or somebody were to say like, hey, Jen, there's like only one skill you get to pick your kids are going to walk away with through college and after college, it's not going to be how they strike a ball. It's not going to be how many home runs they hit. It's awesome, but bragging rights only last you so many years, right? If what I want to know is, did we also improve the human beings we are? Did we also improve how we handle adversity? And sports is such a great way to hand all those lessons to our kids and let them work on that. And truth be told, the results typically follow. A mentally fit team who maybe is just as good as this other team, but can mentally process and together focus on failure recovery and all those important things, they're going to come out on top more times than not with outcomes anyway.
Yeah, I mean, you covered a lot of really cool topics. And again, right there at the end, that team that comes out on top, a lot of times, you and I or other people will look at that and say, oh, well, they've got the best players, or they've got the best coach, or they do all these things. Well, maybe one of the reasons they come out on top is that coach, that AD, that program has spent some time on the mental aspects of the game to bring all those other things together. Um, Again, the characteristics that you're talking about, that, some of the goals of athletic participation, our national organization, the NIAAA, and all the state associations here in Florida, it's the FIAAA. We talk about this idea, or this philosophy, or this goal of educational athletics. And it's
I
not
love that.
a bet we're better than club, or we're better than travel, but we say it's different. It's sports that take place in an educational environment. And to that point, we're not meeting our goals and our objectives if our coaches and our ADs are not doing whatever they can to promote, as you say, mental fitness, mental performance in our student athletes. I find myself sometimes thinking back. You talked about, they didn't have this when you and I were playing. Certainly not. I remember the movie The Natural with Robert Redford.
Yeah.
And they had their version of a mental performance coach come in, and his great speech,
God, I didn't
losing
think about
is a
that.
disease,
Right.
and how the players were just tuning it out. Again, we need to do a much better job than that at bringing mental performance, mental fitness into the game. I'm not trying to cut you off, but if one of our listeners wanted to reach out and find out more about Mind to Define, find out more about mental performance coaching, and maybe, schedule, a visit from the pro herself, Jennifer Siess, how do they do that? How do they get in touch with you?
Sure. You can find me on Mind to Define on all the socials. Well, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. And then my email is just simply Jen, one N, I'm a one N, Jen, at mindtodefine.com. And then, my website is www.mindtodefine.com. And I have a contact form there that sends pretty nicely, and I seem to get them. And I do get people coming in that way. And I know we don't have much time left, but for me, if we can increase the chances, whether we're in the educational environment or clubs, it doesn't matter. If we can increase the chances of better mental health with prevention and management, right? So we want to get to the problem before it's a problem. So it's prevention and management and coping. It's simply coping skills sometimes as well. And if we can add those things daily to our practices, maybe every once in a while, special event training, those kinds of things, I think we're going to find that the proof is in the pudding, so to speak, right? We're going to find that outcomes are going to also, if you get the right talent, and recruitment is important, and the ability to play and be athletic, got to have those. But when you have all those, and when you get to a certain level, you're always going to have all those. The difference maker is that, and if we can turn out mentally fit athletes who then can take on whatever the world wants to hand to them, I think, man, sports is just more than sports. And I love it for what it is. And I love it for what it could be.
Mental performance on its own. It's a goal we all need to be working to help our student athletes achieve. Jennifer Siess, Mind to Define. Thanks so much for joining us again on Wednesday Wisdom.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Okay. For listeners, remember the Zoom recordings of all of our interviews get uploaded to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. Come back again next Wednesday for more Wednesday Wisdom, and just about every day for new content on the Educational AD Podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. We want to thank all of our podcast sponsors that help make Wednesday Wisdom possible. Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. You can find out more by going to hometownticketing.com and talk to their experts. Wall of Fame by Vital Signs. They're on a mission to bring your school's legacy to life. Let them show you how to showcase your school's diverse history and your proudest moments by going to vitalsignswalloffame.com. We also want to thank Huddle. At Huddle, we power sports. Go to huddle.com to talk to their experts. And we want to thank Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack for sponsoring the AD Toolbox segment. Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. Let them help you take your athletic program from good to great. We'll see you next week on Wednesday Wisdom and just about every day for the Educational AD Podcast.